Thanks for joining me this afternoon. So what am I going to do today? The objective's quite simply, we're going to explore leadership and I'll share with you some of my thoughts on leadership and leadership styles, especially in project management. Talk about some lessons in leadership and then hopefully throughout this session you will enjoy the learning experience, because all the research says that if you enjoy yourself, then you will remember the learning and use it for a longer period of time. So a bit of exploration, a bit of understanding, a bit of learning, and some enjoyment as we go through. Now, if you have got any questions throughout the session, please feel free to use the chat box and put your questions in there. I will then, at certain points during the session, stop just to check the chat box and I'll answer any questions you've got. There will also be an opportunity at the end of the session to ask further questions if you have any. Okay, so first of all, one of the quotes from Team Lead Succeed. I've worked with many leaders throughout the years, and there are certain traits that these exemplary leaders have. Those leaders that actually get things done, those leaders that are loved by their teams, they're loved by their people, and ultimately these leaders are just ordinary people. But what they do, and they do on a regular basis, is they invest extra energy into creating high performance teamwork. And because they do that, then it means that the individuals within their teams and their teams as a whole achieve extraordinary things. So what I'm going to share with you is some of the things that these extraordinary leaders do, who, as I mentioned, are just ordinary people like you and like me. So first of all, I'd like to say there is no magic formula in leadership. You know, every book that's been written about leadership, you can't just read it and become an incredibly good leader. The reason why is quite simple. We are all different. Each and every one of us today on this Zoom conference will be different. And when I talk about being different, I'm talking about being different behaviorally. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. So we are all different. Our teams are all different. You know, we will have people in our teams that we get on with very, very easily and very readily. There will be other people in our teams that we will struggle with. And that tends to be not personal, it tends to be behavioral. Because of these behavioral differences, sometimes we will connect with people and other times we will clash with people. And again, I'll explain that as we go through. Our work environments are different. You know, if you think about the changes that have happened over the last couple of years with the pandemic, we've started to have this hybrid way of working. So whereas the majority of people pre-COVID, we all used to trot off into the office and, you know, we would have chats with our team colleagues over a cup of coffee or over lunch. Now suddenly things have changed. We've got this hybrid working where some people are going into the office, some people are working from home. We have these incredible sessions sometimes on Zoom or Teams or other conferencing platforms. And then at other times, you know, this hybrid working and these conference calls can be an absolute nightmare. You know, I've had it personally, I've experienced it personally where, you know, we get cats and dogs and young children walking into the Zoom conference so that other people can see them. And let's be honest, that can be a big distraction. You know, there are some benefits that fall out of hybrid working. And, you know, those are commute times tend to be reduced. You know, we've got an environment at home that sometimes works well for us where we need to concentrate and focus on things. But certainly, ultimately, I believe that hybrid working can have a lot of challenges if it's not managed effectively. So our environments, our work environments are different, and also our project goals are different. You know, you'll be working on totally different projects, totally different outcomes, different stakeholders, different measures of achievement. So if we wrap up all these, there are so many differences that there can't be a magic formula for leadership. However, there are some things that we can do that can assist us in how we lead other people. So the first thing I want to talk about is one of the things that for me, in terms of leading other people, was the most beneficial thing that I ever learned. And that was an understanding of both myself and others and how we behaved. Now, I spoke a couple of years ago at a project management conference. It was held in Singapore. There were delegates from all over the world. And one of the questions I asked them was, how many of you use behavioral profiling to understand who is in your team? Of those people at the conference, 25% said they did. So about 1 in 4 people. And I think behavioral profiling, if you are a leader, a team member, give you some really rich and powerful information to understand who's in your team, what are their strengths, how they make decisions, how they communicate, and ultimately to play to people's strengths. And as a project leader, one of the things that it also gives you, it gives you an understanding of what motivates them, and therefore how you need to adapt your style to make sure that they develop and grow as an individual, and you make the best of their abilities and their skills. Now, most behavioral profiling that's out in the marketplace, it all leads back to this guy, a guy called Carl Jung, who's a Swiss psychologist. As it says, he died in 1961. And Carl Jung, he said that we are all different behaviorally because of 3 different psychological preferences that we're able to measure. He talked about the 2 biggest differences between people. He talked about those people who have a preference for introversion and those people that have a preference for extroversion. Now, you may see that I've spelt it extroversion with the letter A. I know in North America, you spell extroversion with an O. Personally, I'm old school, and I studied Latin at school. And these 2 words, introversion and extroversion, are both from Latin. Intro means within, and version comes from the Latin vertare, which is to turn. So introverts, they get their energy from within themselves. Now, extra is the Latin word which means outer, outside. So those who have a preference for extroversion, they get their energy off other people. So that is the biggest cause of miscommunication between individuals in your teams. And I'll explain a little bit about that later on. So that's why I've spelt it with the letter A rather than the US spelling with the letter O. So we've got introversion and extroversion. And then we have a preference in terms of how we make decisions. And that preference, Carl Jung called it thinking and feeling. So thinking is about making decisions from the head, and feeling is about making decisions from the heart. Now, again, it's only a preference, so we can do both of these, but we just have a preference for one over the other. The next one, the third one, is sensing and intuition, and that's how we make reality of the world around us. And for those of you who may be familiar with MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which was produced by an American mother and daughter, Isabella Myers and Catherine Briggs, and they added one other additional element onto Carl Jung's work. Does anybody want to put in the chat what that additional two preferences were that appear in the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator? So do use the chat to, if you know the answer, what is the fourth pair of preferences that appear in the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI? Anybody typing? Okay, there's nobody typing at the moment, so I'll give you the answer. Oh, somebody's couple of people now. Great, Glenn and Chuck, well done. Judging and perceiving, judging and perception. Yeah. So well done, Chuck and Glenn. Myers-Briggs, what they wanted to do was differentiate themselves from the work of Carl Jung so that they could create a commercial model, and therefore they added the judging and perceiving as those fourth two-pair preference. Great. So there's loads of profiles out on the marketplace, and as we've talked about, there's the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which has 16 different preferences. There's one that I've used previously called Insights, which has 72. There's another one that I use currently, which is called Clarity 4D, and they use the three preferences that Carl Jung talked about. I found, again, and it's only my preference, that over the 30 years that I've been using profiles, the ones that use color are the ones that resonate with people the most. And also it makes it easy for people to use a language of color to get people to understand behaviors. So behavioral profiling, if any of you have undertaken it, you go online, you complete some statements. Quite often those statements are what they call ipsative and normative. So you have to choose a least and a most, and then you choose and grade other statements in between. And again, what that does is it produces a profile which measures your preferences for these different psychological differences that we have. So it measures your introverted and extroverted scale, and then it measures your decision making. So this is an example from one that I use. So on screen is my profile. So again, I'm very extroverted. That's the top thing there. And when I make decisions, I'm always thinking about people first and foremost. So as a leader, this gives me a great opportunity to understand me as an individual. What are my strengths, but also what are my challenges? What are the things that I'm not so good at that don't come to me naturally? And as you can see on the screen here, the things that don't come naturally to me are making decisions from a logical perspective, from a thinking perspective. So that is a challenge for me. And also this blue, which is about data and information and analysis, because I'm very much a people person. I can motivate, I can inspire people to move forward and to get to a place where we need to get to as a team. But what it tells me is that in my team, I need somebody who can keep an eye on the goals, the targets, the deadlines, which is more of that red energy, and also somebody to put in place the plans, which is the blue energy. So as a leader, understanding yourself is really, really important, because then you can build a team around you who can complement your style, complement your leadership style. So going back to these differences, introversion and extroversion, just very briefly, the key thing about introverts, they love the inner world, they get their energy from within, and their style of working is think, 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 do, think. So very quiet, very insular, and like to think things through. So they want to understand before they make a decision. Those people have a preference for extroversion, again, totally different. They create their energy off other people. Their modus operandi is do, think, do. So they want to act on things. Somebody that's just chat, is it possible to get a copy of this presentation? Rosaria, I think that will be possible through Susan. So if Susan can confirm that, then we can make sure that that happens. Great. So with these two differences, introversion and extroversion, the biggest issue comes in team meetings if people don't value and appreciate these differences. Because quite simply, the way introverts work in meetings, introverts don't speak up. And yes, you've probably guessed it, extroverts, they are the opposite. Quite often extroverts don't shut up. So what happens is that we get conflict if we don't value and appreciate these differences, because introverts will look at extroverts and think, if you kept quiet for 5 minutes, I could actually add some value to this conversation. Whereas extroverts often will look at introverts and say, are you in the right meeting because you have not added any value whatsoever because you've not spoken? So as a leader, you've got to be aware of these differences between people in your teams. Then if we look at the second strongest pair of preferences, this is how we make decisions. So people with a thinking preference make decisions from their head. So they're driven by data, they analyze things, and they're objective. So when people with a thinking preference make decisions, it's all about ticks in the box. If I've got enough ticks in the box, I can make a decision to move forward. Whereas those people with a feeling preference, they make decisions from their heart. So it's emotion driven. So they're always focused on people. If I make this decision, what is the impact on people? What is the impact on my team, on my customers, on my shareholders? So they're always thinking about people. So when they make decisions, it's not so much about data, it's very subjective. It's about how people are feeling. So again, some big differences between the two. A tip, you'll often be able to pick up those people who have a thinking and feeling preference just by the sentences they use. If any of you are aware of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, this is one of the things that will teach you to pick up. So quite simply, people with a thinking preference, when they're talking about things, they will say, these are my thoughts. This is what I'm thinking we should do. I think we should do this. So they do use the word thinking a lot. Equally, from the other side, those of the feeling preference will say, I feel we should do this. These are my feelings about what we're about to do. So do listen into people's conversations because it can give you some great clues. So again, these profiling tools, I never recommend one in particular. It may be that your organization uses these already. But if you don't, I would suggest that you seek out ones that use color. As I said, gives you a great language to use, which depersonalizes behaviors and reduces stress. So most profiles that are worth their weight in gold will have an overview about you, how you communicate with your team, and also some of the things, some of the strengths and the value that you add to your teams. when I speak at conferences, I can quite often start to get people understanding what their preference is by simply using adjectives. And here are some adjectives which sum up these different behavioral styles. So I'll give you a few minutes to have a look at those. Now, you will find, each and every one of us will find, that we will have a home base. There will be a set of adjectives on the screen now that you resonate more with than some of the others. Now, we're a mixture of all these four, but it's really important as a leader to understand what your home base is. So as I said previously, my home base is yellow, followed by green, followed by blue, and then my least is red. So do just have a look at those a moment. Okay, there we go. If you want a copy of the presentation, contact me directly at the end of the session. I'll share a slide with my email, and I'll get a copy winging its way to you. Thank you for letting me know that, Susan. So would anybody like to say what their top preference is based on these adjectives? Put it in the chat box and we can have a look to see who we've got on the webinar. Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. Tom said dominant yellow, so that's the same as myself. Glenn has said blue, which again, totally opposite to me and Tom, which is great because we need differences. We need to value these differences. Belinda, green. My wife is called Belinda, and that's the same dominant color that she's got. Same name and same dominant color there for Belinda, unless it is my wife on the Zoom call at the moment. We never know. Susan, green, lovely, and I've certainly picked up some of those green, lovely personal traits before we've gone online, and Susan and I were chatting about our families and what we enjoyed, and that lovely green energy came through. Sergey Mel, blue yellow, which is fascinating because they are total opposites. If that's the case, there's only 4% of the population that have their opposites as their dominant and secondary. They're called creative types. Janice is coming with blue-green, great combination. It's what we call double introverted because the blue is introverted and the green is introverted. And Janine is come back with green. So it's lovely. We've got a wonderful mix of different dominant colors coming through on this webinar. Nobody at the moment who's put in there that they lead with dominant red energy, which is fascinating. You know, I wonder if they've got too much going on that they can't spend sufficient time to be on this webinar. Who knows? Good. Well, you'll get a copy of these slides as Susan mentioned at the end, so that you can have a look at this. Just to let you know, the motto of the red: be brief, be bright, and be gone. They're very fast paced and want to get on with things. The yellow is involve me. They like to get involved with different people, different projects, because they get their energy off others. They like to share their ideas. The green is show me you care. Very, very people-centric. They want to make sure that there's harmony within the team, and they're very good listeners, picking up what clients and stakeholders of your projects may want. And then the blue, wonderful, again, give me the detail. They're into the process, the procedure, the analysis. They can spot risks a mile off. So they bring different strengths. I call the red the strategist because they keep us firmly focused on what we're trying to achieve. The yellow is the communicator, especially verbally. A lot of optimism there with that yellow energy. They will boost your team if things are going a little bit pear-shaped, a little bit wrong. The green energy, wonderful again, the diplomat, because they listen, they're very loyal and supportive. And the blue is what I call the expert, because they like to analyze things. They're very consistent. They are very thorough as well. So as a leader, what you want to do is try and understand who you've got in your team that can complement you. So here's an example of a team that I was working with recently. And as you can see, there's a whole mixture of different personality types here in this team. And the leader of this team was a guy called Alan, and he sits in G1. So he led with green energy, but his second preference was red. But Alan was wonderful at making sure that he had and utilized the different strengths of different people in the team. So really worked well when you not only understand yourself as a leader, but you understand those team members around you. Because as a leader, the golden rule is do unto others as they would be done unto. If you're going to get the most out of people, you want to treat them in a way that they like to be treated. You need to develop them as individuals in different ways. You may have heard the phrase, different strokes for different folks. And that's what it boils down to. So leadership is about being adaptable in your style. You need to understand yourself and what motivates you, but also you need to understand who else you've got in your team so that you can motivate and inspire them in different ways. So for instance, those people with a lot of red energy, they're inspired and motivated when you say to them, go and hit that target, go and hit that deadline, because that's what they like doing. They like achieving. People with a lot of yellow energy, you want to motivate them by getting them to come up with creative ideas, new ideas, getting them to spread the word to other people. People with a lot of green energy will be motivated and inspired by the outcomes of the project and how positively it will impact people, how it will impact maybe your internal teams, how it may impact on the people externally that are your stakeholders of the project that you're currently working on. And people with blue energy, they will be motivated, inspired by making sure that there are plans in place, that risks are mitigated, that things are written down. They're inspired by efficiency and effectiveness. So as a leader, if you can pick up these different motivations from different people, then you can lead them in different ways. The other thing as a leader that you need to be aware of is what your team wants to see in you. Every couple of years on LinkedIn, I'm a big user of LinkedIn for sharing knowledge and my experience with other people. So each couple of years, I actually undertake a survey and I go out to all the people who follow me on LinkedIn and just ask them the question, what are the attributes that you want to see in your leaders? And then I collect that data, I collect that information, and I share the thoughts of other people. So again, this is really important for you to understand as a leader. What are the things that your staff want to see in you? So these are the results of the 2020 survey. And first of all, people said they want their leaders to show empathy. And I've put the dictionary definition underneath that, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. So empathic or empathetic are other words that are associated with this. So, when somebody comes in, you can say, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from on this, because it could be that you've experienced something similar. So empathy was number one. The second one was integrity. So the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. And that's really important. You know, you've got to be honest in the way that you treat people. You've got to be honest in the way that you communicate. And you've got to make sure that you are principled, that you have strong moral values that underpin what you do. The third one was visionary, which is about thinking and planning the future with imagination or wisdom. So your team members don't just want to come in and do a job. They actually want to be motivated, inspired by understanding, what are we trying to achieve in the future as a team, as an organization? So you need to create a compelling vision of the future so that people will join you on that journey to where you've got to get to. And the fourth one was trust. So very, very similar in terms of integrity. So there's some slight differences there, but there is that similarity, that connection between integrity and trust. You know, they're all emotionally based. So assured reliance on character. And so I thought I'd share those with you, because I think it's quite important as a leader that you reflect on these and just think about how you demonstrate those to your team members. You know, what are the ones that come easier to you, and what are the ones that you struggle with? And if there are some that give you a challenge, you know, think about what you're going to do to overcome those challenges. And it's interesting, again, just food for thought, when you think about some of our leaders, and I'm not going to mention any names at this point, but if you think about some of the world leaders that we have, and do they demonstrate any of these? So I shall leave you with that just to ponder on. Okay, next bit of learning. As a leader, you are in the spotlight. So what you say and what you do will be noticed. And I just want you again to be aware that, yes, people will remember the things that you say. They will also remember the way in which you've treated them. So they will also be able to see it when they can't even hear you. So just be aware, be on your guard all the time, because we have this wonderful ability to pick up people's body language. So just because people can't hear what you're saying, if you're in eyesight, they will be able to see you, and they will pick up on your body language. So therefore, you as a leader have got to remain positive at all times in terms of not only what you do, your actions, what you say, but also your body language, so that you remain true to your values right throughout what you do. Because if there's a chink in that armor, people will see it, and all of a sudden, people's perception of you will change. So just be aware, as a leader, you are always in the spotlight. Another thing, food for thought, leadership is not a desk job. Over the years, I've experienced many leaders in different organizations, and some of them just remain behind a desk for a large part of the time. You know, even in open plan offices, they would just sit at the desk and that would be it. It was even worse when there were offices where they had their own office that they could shut the door, and sometimes they would not come out at all, apart from going for a coffee or going for a lunch or to a meeting. A little story I'll share with you. Many years ago, when I was in Barclays and I led an operational team of 30, we had in the UK bring your children to work day, and it was for those children who their ages between 15 and 16, who were thinking about what they would be doing for their exams, and maybe giving them food for thought in terms of what they wanted to do as a career. So I brought my daughter into work, Becky. She was 16 at the time, and I planned out for her that she would go and work with different people in my team throughout the week. So she worked with a person for half a day to understand what they did. Then she would move on in the afternoon, work with another person to understand what they did. So I tried to give her a broad as possible understanding of what the team and individuals did within my team. So she ended up seeing 10 people over the week. And at the end of the week, I asked her how it had gone, what she'd enjoyed, what she didn't like, had she had any other thoughts about a career in banking, or was it steering away from her? And then I just asked her in general, are there any things that you'd like to ask me? And she said yes. She said, I've been watching you out of the corner of my eye during the week. And she said, probably 90% of the time, she said, you are not at your desk. And she said, can you explain that? And I said, yeah, quite simply, Becky. As a leader, I'm not at my desk because I'm doing my job. Because I said, I believe that leadership is about developing relationships, developing individuals. So I said, I spend most of my time chatting to my team leaders, my supervisors, my operational team members, to understand what's going on and what we can do to make it as effective as possible. So just that little story there that may get you thinking about your leadership style. Because I think that leadership, personally, should be 20% setting the strategy, goals and vision. And that's what you do, what your team does. And then I think it should be about 80% of building positive relationships and a dynamic team culture. And if you look at that, that equates to one day a week working on your strategy. And then for the 4 other days, it's about building relationships with other people to move that strategy forward. Again, just my thoughts, but maybe it gets you thinking about your leadership style and how much time you spend on different things. Okay, so we've talked about relationships, we've talked about behaviors, we've talked about who's in your team. The other thing that I want to raise your awareness of as a project leader is about your teamwork and measuring your teamwork. Again, at this conference in Singapore, I asked the question, how many of you measure your teamwork? Only 1% of the room measured how effective their teamwork was. Now, in the project management world, it's called the iron triangle, and that says that in terms of project measurement, we tend to measure things based around that triangle. So it's cost, quality, or time. And it's called the iron triangle because if you spend more time on resources on one, it will have an impact on the others. Right at the start of this webinar, I mentioned that I created a model called Team Dynamics that measures 16 areas that are really important if you want to achieve high performance teamwork. And the reason measuring your teamwork is so important is the fact that when we are working on projects, we will have these key performance indicators, but the success of your key performance indicators will be impacted by how effective your teamwork is. So all I'd say to you is think about your teamwork and how you measure it to make sure it's effective as possible. In the model that I created, the most important things are on level 1. So as a leader, You need to make sure your team understand your purpose. You need to build trust between team members. You need plans to get you from A to B to make sure that your project goals are achieved. And then you need to harness the skills and knowledge of people by making sure that your team are collaborating effectively. Those are the four that I would say any team leader should have a real firm grip on and an understanding of. Level 2, level 3, and level 4 in this model, if they are not working effectively, will not make as much negative difference as those in level 1. So when I work with teams, they're able to measure their effectiveness, and they get lots of data about these 16 areas of teamwork. So they can understand, the leader and the team can understand whether they are dysfunctional, whether they are an average team, or whether they are high performing. So again, as a leader, it gives you some wonderful information. Say, this is where we are now. What do we need to do when we're moving forward? I just thought I'd share something with you about purpose, which I said, for me, is the most important thing that everybody in your team needs to understand. Some research I did said that 4 out of 10 team members actually don't understand what their team is all about, which is frightening, absolutely frightening. So if you're working on a project, it could be that 4 out of 10 of your team members don't understand what the purpose of the project is. There is something that you can do simply to help your team members. You can get them to create a team purpose statement. So simply start off with, what do we do as a team? What does that enable, and what are the benefits? So we exist to do X, Y, and Z, which enables A, B, and C, and the benefits are 1, 2, and 3. Doesn't take long to create. I was working with a team last week in the UK, a senior leadership team. They created their team purpose statement within 45 minutes. So it should be motivational. You should be able to tell somebody in a minute. There should be no jargon, and it should be understandable. Here's an example for you. I worked with a finance team. Their team purpose, when I asked them, was this: to produce monthly accounts that are accurate as possible as quickly after the month end. Not very motivational, not very inspirational. Certainly wouldn't get me out of bed in the morning to go into work. We worked on their team purpose statement, and this is what they came up with. So I'll give you a moment to read that. Hopefully you'll agree that it adds a lot more value. And this team, before they did this, were known throughout the organization as the bean counters. And a lot of different parts of the organization didn't think very highly of them at all. Once they created this and shared it with other parts of the organization, suddenly people's perception of this team changed. They suddenly realized the value that they added. And therefore, the morale in the team was suddenly boosted, simply because they themselves and others in the organization really started to understand the value that they added. So as project leaders, if you're going to do anything based on this webinar, I would suggest you go back to your team and undertake this activity if you haven't done it previously. Really important. Everybody in your team buys into this and they understand what your team purpose is. So hopefully you've got some few hints and tips here about leadership. In summary, great leaders know themselves and their teams well. So if you don't use profiling, I would suggest that you want to consider that. Be mindful of what attributes your team want to see in you, what they want you to demonstrate. You know, those 4 attributes that they said they wanted to see. So they wanted you to demonstrate empathy, They wanted you to demonstrate integrity. They wanted you to be visionary, and they wanted you to be trustworthy. So do remember those. Focus the majority of your time on building relationships. Ultimately, it's relationships that make things happen. And as a leader, as I said, my rule of thumb was the 80-20 rule, and it certainly worked for me. 20% of the time, 1 day a week, talking about strategy and making sure that the plans are in place to move us forward. 80% of the time, I spent building relationships with my team and my stakeholders in terms of the projects that I used to deliver. And then finally, ensure as a minimum, everyone in your team knows your team purpose, what your team exists to do. So I hope that that's given you some food for thought and may help you. So thank you for coming along on the webinar today and for allowing me to share some of my thoughts. As Susan mentioned, if you want a copy of the slides, get your smartphone and take a photo of this, or just jot down it's nick@ngagementworks.com, and as you'll see, the word engagement is without the E, so NGAGE. So please do take a note of that if you want a copy of the slides.
So with that, I think we'll wrap things up. So Nick, appreciate you presenting.
Pleasure as always. Take care.